a lighthouse for human rights, and the center that transforms your decisions, the decisions of member states, into action. 80 years on, we confront again the question our founders faced, only more urgent, more intertwined, more unforgiving. What kind of world do we choose to build together? Excellencies, we have our work cut out for us, as our ability to carry out that work is being cut from us. We have entered in an age of reckless disruption and relentless human suffering. Look around. The principles of the United Nations that you have established are under siege. Listen, the pillars of peace and progress are buckling under the weight of impunity, inequality, and indifference. Sovereign nations invaded, hunger weaponized, truce silence, rising smoke from bombed-out cities, rising anger in fractured societies, rising seas swallowing coastlines. Each one a warning, each one a question. What kind of world will we choose? A world of raw power or a world of laws? A world that is a scramble for self-interest or a world where nations come together? A world where might makes right or a world of rights for all? Excellencies, our world is becoming increasingly multipolar, and this is positive, reflecting a more diverse, dynamic global landscape. But multipolarity without effective multilateral institutions can court chaos, as Europe has learned the hard way, resulting in World War I. It was multipolar, but there was no multilateral institutions. So let's be clear. International cooperation is not naivete. It is hard-headed pragmatism. In a world where there's leap borders, isolation is an illusion. No country can stop a pandemic alone. No army can halt rising temperatures. No algorithm can rebuild trust once it is broken. These are global stress tests of our system, our solidarity, and our resolve. I'm convinced we can pass these tests, and we must. Because people everywhere are demanding something better, and we owe them a system worthy of their trust and a future worthy of their dreams. And so we must make the choice, an active choice, to reaffirm the imperative of international law, to reassert the centrality of multilateralism, to reinforce justice and human rights, and to recommit to the principles that gave rise to our organization, and to the promise contained in its first words, we the peoples. Excellencies, the choices we face are not part of an ideological debate. They are a matter of life and death for millions. As I scan the global landscape, we must make 5 critical choices. First, we must choose peace rooted in international law. Peace is our first obligation. Yet today, wars rage with a barbarity we vowed never to allow. Too often, the Charter is brandished when convenient and trampled when not. But the Charter is not optional. It is our foundation. And when the foundation cracks, everything built upon fractures. Around the world, we see countries acting as if the rules don't apply to them. We see humans treated as less than human, and we must call it out. Impunity is the mother of chaos, and it has spawned some of the most atrocious conflicts of our times. In Sudan, civilians are being slaughtered, starved, and silenced. Women and girls face unspeakable violence. There is no military solution. I urge all parties, including those in this hall, end the external support that is fueling this bloodshed. Push to protect civilians, because the Sudanese people deserves peace, dignity and hope. In Ukraine, relentless violence continues to kill civilians, destroy civilian infrastructure and threaten global peace and security. I commend recent diplomatic efforts by the United States and others. We must work for a full ceasefire and a just, lasting peace in accordance with the Charter, UN resolutions and international law. In Gaza, the horrors are approaching a third monstrous year. They are the result of decisions that defy basic humanity. The scale of death and destruction are beyond any other conflict in my years as Secretary General. The International Court of Justice has issued legally binding provisional measures in the case named application of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide in the Gaza Strip. Since then, a famine has been declared and the killing has intensified. The measures stipulated by the ICJ must be implemented fully and immediately. Nothing can justify the horrific Hamas terror attacks of October 7 and the taking of hostages, both of which I have repeatedly condemned. And nothing can justify the collective punishment of the Palestinian people and the systematic destruction of Gaza. We know what is needed. Permanent ceasefire now. All the hostages released now. Full humanitarian access now. And we must not relent in the only viable answer to sustainable Middle East peace, a two-state solution as so eloquently reaffirmed yesterday. We must urgently reverse dangerous trends on the ground. Relentless settler expansion and violence and the looming threat of annexation must stop. Everywhere, from Haiti to Yemen, to Myanmar and the Sahel and beyond, we must choose peace anchored in international law. The past year has brought glimmers of hope, including the ceasefire between Cambodia and Thailand, and the agreement between Azerbaijan and Armenia brokered by the United States. But far too many crises continue unchecked. Impunity prevails, lawlessness is a contagion, it invites mayhem, accelerates terror, and risks a nuclear free-for-all. When accountability shrinks, graveyards grow. When UN staff and facilities are attacked, violating legal obligations, so too is the core of our ability to serve and deliver. The Security Council must live up to its responsibilities. It must be more representative, more transparent, and more effective. And beyond crisis response, we must tackle the injustices that ignite conflict: exclusion, inequality, impunity, and corruption. The surest way to silence the guns is to raise the volume for justice. Real security is born of fairness and opportunity for all. Excellences, cela m'amène au deuxième point. Nous devons choisir les droits humains et la dignité humaine. Les droits humains ne sont pas un ornement de la paix, ils en sont le socle. Les droits humains, sociaux, économiques, politiques, civiques et culturels sont universels, indivisibles et interdépendants. Choisir les droits, c'est plus que des paroles. C'est choisir la justice plutôt que le silence. C'est préserver la liberté et l'espace civique. Faire avancer l'égalité pour les femmes et les filles. Combattre le racisme et la discrimination sous toutes leurs formes. Protéger les défenseurs des droits humains, les journalistes et la liberté d'expression, et garantir les droits des réfugiés et des migrants afin que la mobilité soit sûre et conforme au droit international. Les droits humains sont un combat quotidien, en ligne comme hors ligne. Ils exigent de la volonté politique, mais la dignité ne se résume pas à la protection des droits. Elle exige pleinement concrétiser ces droits grâce à un développement inclusif et résilient. Des droits qui mettent fin à la pauvreté et à la faim. Des droits qui ouvrent de la voie de l'éducation, de la santé et des opportunités. Les objectifs de développement durable sont notre feuille de route commune pour concrétiser ces droits. Mais pour avancer sur cette voie, il faut du carburant. Ce carburant, c'est le financement, et nous savons ce qu'un développement bien mené peut accomplir. Au cours de la dernière décennie, des millions de personnes supplémentaires ont accédé à l'électricité, à des solutions de cuisson propres et à l'Internet. Le mariage des enfants recule, la représentation des femmes avance, mais les coupes dans l'aide au développement font des ravages. Pour un grand nombre de personnes, elles représentent
finances. By last decade, millions of people got electricity and clean energy and even internet services. Children marriage is decreasing and women representation is increasing, but the decline of developmental aid is bad for many. There is a future that is being stolen from many people. This is the paradox in our era. We have the solution, but we are saving the fuel that will allow us to develop. Choosing dignity means choosing solidarity. We need to fix the international financial system to be a catalyst for development for all. We need multilateral international banks to give funds and to mobilize resources from the private sector for countries that are in need. We need to ease the burden of debts justly to reach each country that needs it, including average income country. We need to monitor our water resources to make sure these practices are adopted. This will happen through the financial institutions that represent the world and that has more representation in developing countries than in developed countries. Now we need to choose once and for all human rights and human dignity, and we need to enable ourselves from the just transformation for the sake of people and for this planet. Ladies and gentlemen, this leads us to the third option. We need to choose climate justice. The climate problem is accelerating, and also solutions must be accelerating. The future of clean energy is no longer a far-fetched promise, but can be a reality. No government or industry can stop it, but some people are trying. In this framework, they are harming economies and they are trying to keep high prices fixed and lose a historical opportunity. Fossil fuels are losing. Last year, there were many sources of renewable energy. They are the most attainable, and they serve as a catalyst to industry. This source bonds the whole world and frees us from the hegemony of fossil fuels. But it's not yet to come, as the grids are not spreading as fast, and the money of taxpayers that needs to be devoted to clean energy is so little The percentage is from 9 to 1 fossil fuels compared to clean energy. Science says that the global warming is still possible, but we still have an opportunity. ICJ ruled that there is a mutual commitment incumbent on all countries, but we need to accelerate our work. Tomorrow I will meet the leaders to announce our new goals. G20 that has the most emissions need to guide the process. All countries need to take part in this, and we are only steps away from the climate conference in Brazil by adopting the best practices and adopting a roadmap with an annual budget to finance climate for the sake of developing countries by duplicating the funds devoted to mediation of climate consequences. We need to provide finance and to fund the loss and damage. This will be actualized through the private sector and non-governmental institutions. They need to work together to provide room for developing countries and to open doors for innovation, including taxes and sectors that has high emission. We have the solutions and the tools, but we need to choose climate justice and to choose work for climate. The fourth point is choosing to devote technology to serve human beings. Artificial intelligence is rewriting the way we are learning by and communicating by. The question is not how to stop it, but how to guide it towards public interest. Technology needs to serve us, not to be the master. They need to foster human dignity and their resourcefulness. In spite of that, artificial intelligence is exceeding all criteria, and it is kept.
These technologies remain largely ungoverned. We need universal guardrails and common standards across platforms. No company should be above the law. No machines should decide who lives or dies. No system should be deployed without transparency, safety and accountability. Last month, this Assembly took a historic step, establishing an independent international scientific panel on AI and an annual global dialogue on AI governance. Two new pillars of a shared architecture, connecting science with policy to bring clarity and foresight, enabling innovation to flourish while advancing our values and our rights, and ensuring governments, companies and civil society can help shape common norms. We must build on these mechanisms and close the capacity gap. All countries must be able to design and develop AI, not just to consume it. I have proposed voluntary financing options to build AI computing power, data and skills in developing nations. No country should be locked out of the digital future or locked into systems it cannot shape or trust. And governments must lead with vision and companies must act with responsibility. And we, the international community, must ensure that technology lifts up humanity. So let us choose cooperation over fragmentation, ethics over expediency, and transparency over opacity. Technology will not wait for us, but we can still choose what it serves. So let us choose wisely. Fifth and finally, to meet all these goals, we must choose to strengthen the United Nations for the 21st century. the forces shaking our world are also testing the foundations of the United Nations system. We are being hit by rising geopolitical tensions and divisions, chronic uncertainty, and mounting financial strain. But those who depend on the United Nations must not be made to bear the cost, especially now, when for every dollar invested to support our core work to build peace, the world spends $750 on weapons of war. This is not only unsustainable, it is indefensible. In this moment of crisis, the United Nations has never been more essential. The world needs our unique legitimacy, our convening power, our vision to unite nations, to bridge divides and confront the challenges before us. The Pact for the Future has shown your determination to build a United Nations that is stronger, more inclusive, and more effective. That is the logic and the urgency of our UN80 initiative. We are moving swiftly and decisively. I put forward concrete proposals, a revised budget for 2026 that strengthens accountability, improves delivery, and cuts costs. Practical reforms to implement mandates more effectively and efficiently with greater impact. And ideas to spark a paradigm shift in the structure of the UN and how its parts work together. Most of these decisions rest with you, the Member States, and we will move forward in full respect of the established procedures. Together, let us choose to invest in a United Nations that adapts, innovates, and is empowered to deliver for people everywhere. Excellencies, my overriding message comes down to this. Now is the time to choose. It's not enough to know what the right choices are. I urge you to make them. I grew up in a world where choices were few. I was raised in the darkness of dictatorship, where fear silenced voices and hope was nearly crushed. Yet, even the bleakest hours, especially then, I discovered a truth that has never left me. Power does not reside in the hands of those who dominate or divide. Real power resides from people, from our shared resolve to uphold dignity, to defend equality, to believe fiercely in our common humanity potential of every human being. I learned early to persevere, to speak out, to refuse to surrender, no matter the challenge, no matter the obstacle, no matter the hour. We must and we will overcome. Because in a world of many choices, there is one choice we must never make, the choice to give up. We must never give up. That is my promise to you, for peace, for dignity, for justice, for humanity, for the world we know is possible when we work as one. I will never, ever give up. Thank you.
I thank the Secretary General. The Assembly will now turn to agenda item 8, entitled General Debate. Years, longer than average human life. This anniversary of the United Nations should have been a moment of celebration. But this is not an ordinary year. Just look at the state of our world, as the Secretary General described. Thousands of orphans in Gaza are wandering around the rubble, eating sand drinking contaminated water. 90-year-old women in Ukraine are hiding from drones, trapped in their homes instead of living their final years in peace. Children in Haiti, too afraid to walk to school, afraid they might be gunned down by gangs like their friends. And for every conflict and tragedy that seizes the headlines, there are so many more that are forgotten, lost to the news cycle. Like women in Democratic Republic of the Congo, shielding their daughters from armed groups, fearful they might be raped. And Rohingya children spending their whole childhood in tattered tents, unable to remember what their home looks like. Faced with these realities, now is not the time to celebrate, but to ask ourselves, where is the United Nations? Distinguished heads of state and government, Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, people out there in the world watching us. Clearly, we have to do better. But what we should not let cynics allow to weaponize these failures, to argue that our institution is a waste of money, outdated, irrelevant. When the principles of the Charter are ignored, is it the UN that has failed? When tanks rolled into Ukraine, was it because Article 2 of the Charter is not clear enough about sovereignty and territorial integrity? When civilians, children, are killed in Gaza, is it humanitarian law at fault for failing to protect them? It's not the Charter which fails. It's not the UN as an institution which fails. The Charter, our Charter, is only as strong as member states' willingness to uphold it, and their willingness to hold to account those who violate it. Excellencies, yes, our world is in pain. Yes, we have failures. But imagine how much worse would it be without the United Nations? Would a single person be better off without it? Without UNICEF, 26 million children would not have received an education. Without the World Food Programme, nearly 125 million people would have lacked life-saving food assistance. Without the World Health Organization, over 1 billion vaccines would not have been supplied. Sometimes we could have done more, but we cannot let this dishearten us. If we stop doing the right thing, evil would prevail. This 80th session is not about big celebrations. It's about finding the resolve not to give up, the resolve to be better together, just as our predecessors did 8 decades ago. This institution was born in a world on fire and desperate for reprieve. 750 million, nearly a third of humanity back then, still under colonial rule. 2 world wars in a generation, 70 million dead. The horrors of the Holocaust revealed to our collective shame. This was a generation that knew almost nothing but suffering and despair. The signing of the Charter in 1945 gave hope to millions, gave us a North Star that guided our path from the ashes of war, helped guide nations from colonial rule into independent states, helped end apartheid. Across the decades, the United Nations has been a compass pointing toward peace, humanity, and justice. We have not always succeeded, but the story of this institution is not a story of easy victories. It's a story of falling and rising, of pulling ourselves and each other back up and trying harder. We gather here for the 80th time, not for empty celebration, not out of ritual, not to hear our own voices. We gather to prove that this institution matters, and that through this institution, every nation represented here, no matter how big or small, can summon again the strength and unity first shown in San Francisco 80 years ago. The courage and resolve of world leaders who, even while some called them back then naive, believed they could build a better world from the wreckage of the old. They showed then what true leadership is. It's not about imposing your will or putting others down. True leadership is about lifting others up, not out of altruism, but for our mutual benefit, and even out of our self-interest. Because as our founders and every architect of peace since then has understood, helping others is what makes ultimately our own countries stronger. Could any state have faced the global pandemic alone? The virus did not have any passport. We were only able to solve it at the end with the support of the World Health Organization. The climate crisis does not stop at borders. CO2 emissions anywhere affect people everywhere. Even the wealthiest cities in the world cannot shield themselves from wildfires. And imagine coming here by plane, how safe would you feel to step into the next airplane if there were no International Civil Aviation Organization anymore, which is responsible for setting safety regulations for 5 billion passengers each year? How comfortable would you be with your children using the internet while AI is uncontrolled and unchecked? As the lines between what is real and fake start to blur. In this globalized, digitalized world, we work together or we suffer alone. Excellencies, the theme of this milestone session and the high-level week is therefore Better Together. 80 years and more for peace, development, and human rights. Will living up to that be easy? No. But this hall was not built for easy times. It was built to come together to confront the hardest topics. This session is a session where the high-level week is about resolving differences. We showed some of it yesterday already. But even the house of dialogue and diplomacy needs a renovation. That is why the UN80 initiative and the wider reform process are not luxuries, but necessities. We are literally now at a crossroads, a make it or break it moment, politically, financially. Therefore, we have to deliver a United Nations that is agile, cost-effective, and fit for purpose. Member States have to give the Secretary General and this process their full support, because reform cannot stop in New York. It must carry through to every capital. That includes delivering the Pact for the Future and accelerating progress on the Sustainable Development Goals. Again, this is not about charity. It's about addressing the core purposes of this institution, about strengthening our foundations across all 3 pillars: peace and security, human rights, and sustainable development. They are inseparable. Leaving hundreds of millions trapped in extreme poverty, vulnerable to crisis, and denied their human rights is not only a moral failure, it's a recipe for global unrest, terrorism, and a tragic waste of humanity's greatest resource, its people. Put it simply, without the SDGs, there cannot be lasting peace. Excellencies, our future as an institution will also be shaped by the selection of the next Secretary General. And here we must pause and reflect. In nearly 80 years, this organization has never chosen a woman for that role. One might wonder how out of 4 billion potential candidates, there could not be found a single one. Of course, the choice rests with member states. But those of you having been there yesterday celebrating Beijing, one strong female leader after the other from all our continents. Like 80 years ago, we are standing at a crossroads. And it's up to us, to every single member state, to live up to the same leadership as your predecessors did. To act when action is needed. To uphold the principles of our Charter. To be better together. To show the people around the world that this United Nation is there. Today, tomorrow, and for the next 8 decades. Because, after all, it's the life insurance for every